Hello and welcome to Progress Not Perfection. My name is Della and I have a very special guest, John Russell.
Hi.
I'm so happy for you to be here.
Same here. Thank you.
Absolutely. So usually I wait, but I want to go ahead and blurt this out. You have been clean for 20 years.
Yeah, 20 years last month.
20 years last month.
Yeah.
That's absolutely amazing. You have the most clean time of anyone I've interviewed yet.
That's great.
And I can guarantee your story is going to be inspirational. I've never heard you speak before, but I can't believe that I haven't. But yeah, I haven't.
You just haven't gone to the right places.
I
That's
haven't-
okay.
No, I haven't gone to the right places. I need to start getting back to it though.
Right.
So before we begin, I want to make you completely aware that this will be televised on KCM and as well as my YouTube channel.
Okay.
Okay?
It's fine by me. Let's do this.
All right. Well, let's get into it.
Okay.
Where are you from originally?
I was born and raised in Oakland, California. Lived there for about 30 years. That's where the whole thing really started.
That's it.
Yeah, I ripped and ran throughout the Bay Area from San Francisco all the way to across the Bay, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, that's where the insanity began.
That's it.
Yeah.
So, how old were you when you first experimented?
When I first experimented, I mean, you know, it's kind of tough to tell because by the age of 3, I was on Ritalin. I was born about 3 months premature, so I didn't fully develop in the womb. That said, by the time I was 3 years old, they put me on Ritalin, and I was, because I was hyperactive. That was the word they used then, ADHD. And from there, I took Ritalin until I was about 11 years old. After that, they took me off it, and a couple of years after that, I started self-medicating.
So you were in your middle teens?
Yeah, early teens. I was about 13 when I first picked up.
What did you first pick up, if you don't mind me asking?
I picked up marijuana,
Marijuana.
pot. I was trying to impress a girl. It was, I always needed the attention. And this was, a way for me to get attention. And there was a girl, she said, well, want to try smoking some pot? And I jumped at the chance because, it was the girl. And little did I know that that would be the doorway to an absolutely nightmarish experience for a while. And that nightmarish experience eventually led to a life worth living. But yeah, it did not start out, anything other than somewhat innocently. But little did I know where it would take me and where it would eventually lead me to.
Right. So was it just marijuana that you were doing for a while, or?
Well, yeah, that was where I started. Like I said, I grew up in Oakland, and in the 1980s, Oakland was known for cocaine. So there was a lot of that floating around. That happened for a while. Basically, when we talk about drugs of choice, my drug of choice was more.
More. I have actually said that before myself.
Yeah.
I call myself a garbage can. Whatever I could get inside of myself, that's what I wanted to do.
Exactly. My whole thing was to change the way I felt,
Yeah.
because for the longest time I never felt adequate. I never felt like I contributed. I never felt anything good about myself, and drugs led to that experience for me, where all of a sudden I could feel good on command.
That's very true. When I was using it, filled a void. It took my mind off of other things that were bothering me. So when did the realization hit you that addiction had taken a hold of you?
Oh God. Well, I'll say it like this. By the time I was 15, I knew there was a problem. But at that point, I wasn't prepared to say that it was addiction. It was more along the lines of, why doesn't why can't I allow the party to stop when all my friends manage to make it stop on the weekends?
Right.
I make it stop Monday morning. Monday morning, I'm still raring to go.
Yeah.
When I'm supposed to be getting ready for school, I'm sitting around trying to figure out where I'm going to score that day.
Right.
Yeah, and when I got to that point, it led to some serious consequences. By the time I was 15 and a half, almost 16, I was in a lot of trouble. I ran away from home. I stole money. I stole drugs. I stole food. I stole a car along with three other friends of mine. And we eventually wound up in a little town in Northern California where my grandparents had a cabin. We broke into that cabin, and from that cabin, which was about 50 miles west of Reno, Nevada, we managed to basically commit more crimes than I could possibly count. And by the time I was 16, I was looking at 99 years in the state of Nevada.
Wow.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I can only imagine.
I started with, like I said, I went on basically a crime spree. I started robbing people with that gun that we stole. And in the state of Nevada, when they found out that we were committing these armed robberies, they wanted to sentence me to 99 years.
And you were 16?
I was 16 years old.
Wow.
I was very lucky in the fact that I got arrested on the California side of the border, and California refused to extradite me to the state of Nevada for a sentence that hefty. I was very, very blessed. I didn't realize it at the time. I thought, well, the party's going to stop for a while now, and that was the only thing I focused on. I didn't even realize the math did not add up in my head just what a bullet I had dodged. As a result of that spree, I wound up in a boot camp program out in the middle of the Nevada desert. It was meant to last a year, but being the good addict that I am and the hardhead that I am, I stretched it out to 3.5. And by the time I was 18 and a half, I was back out on the streets.
In Nevada?
That's where the program was. The program was in Nevada. I was released back to California, and from there, everything took right back off where I left. Right where I left off.
So I have to ask, were you clean during that 3.5 years, or?
How about the word abstinent? That's a better word. That's a much better word. Abstinent. But yes, I managed to not use. It was very difficult to get things in there.
Right.
I mean,
I can imagine.
Well, where I was, I literally lived on a dry lake bed 20 miles away from the nearest town. 20 miles away from nowhere is what we called it. And then from nowhere, you had to still get somewhere. It was literally in the armpit of Nevada. It is just nothing but sand and sagebrush everywhere. And when I got out of there, I went right back to Oakland and right back to ripping and running like a madman. By the time I was, 22, I guess, I had started doing other drugs, crystal meth being chief among them. And crystal meth was the true love of my life at that point. But it really didn't matter what you had. I would take it because, like I said, my drug of choice was more. I wanted to feel what I wanted to feel, and I didn't want to feel what I didn't want to feel.
Right.
It was, well, now I call it a chemical means to a spiritual experience. And what I didn't realize is that I had this big, gaping spiritual hole. And that's what my addiction is. It's a big, gaping spiritual hole. The only way I can fill it is either one with a spiritual means, or the only other way I knew how to fill it at the time was a chemical means. Eventually, it led me to getting arrested again and again and again. That was, only the beginning. If that was where it ended, I would have been very lucky.
Right.
Um,
So what were all these risks? Was it due to your addiction or?
Most of the time, addiction and just absolute maniacal behavior. They say that we're not capable of making rational decisions 100% of the time.
No.
I was capable of making rational decisions about 5% of the time, I would say.
Right.
Otherwise, it was based upon how I felt versus, based upon whether I thought something through. No, that never happened. I never thought anything through. If I felt something, I acted upon it. And, the consequences of that were dire sometimes. I got locked up more times than I can count.
Yeah.
Whether somebody made me mad, whether I needed to score, whether I needed to get some money for something or another so that I could trade it so that I could score, whatever it was, I was completely at the whims of my emotions and my disease.
So the term addiction is a disease.
Mm-hmm.
You believe that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, when I look at it, there's no question about it. It's definitely a health problem, mental health problem. And, as far as I'm concerned, a spiritual health problem. I mean, it has all sorts of consequences, attached to it, sometimes physical, sometimes mental, sometimes, legal. But in the end, what I've found is that when I treat it spiritually, what happens is all the other areas that it affects me and seem to straighten out. And for the past 20 years, I haven't felt it necessary to put a chemical in me to change the way I feel.
So you don't have the urge to use anymore?
It's not so much that I don't have the urge. I mean, I'm an addict. The disease will always affect me no matter what I do. My disease is always looking for the cracks in my program to rip me wide open.
Yeah.
But when I take care of it, when I treat it, those cracks, they become fewer and farther between. It's a lot harder for my disease to attack me today because I don't give it the opportunities to.
Say more about that. Like, what are your coping skills when you do have the urge to use?
Well, I go to a lot of meetings, and anybody around here will tell you that they see me at meetings more than anywhere else. I do a lot of prayer and meditation. I'm of service to my community and to my friends and to people that know me today. I'm of service to people I've never met. Mm-hmm. I've been given the opportunity through recovery to absolutely change my life, completely turn it around from the absolute madness that it used to be, the downward spiral that just sped up and went faster and faster the farther and farther I fell, to a life where I can wake up in the morning, look myself in the eye in the mirror, and be okay with the person that I see there.
Yeah. And I don't know about for all addicts, but I had the same problem with myself. Go to the bathroom, brush my hair. I don't really care what I look like, but now I do. Well, before the interview, I was like, hold on, let me go check my hair real quick. And I was like, you know what? Like, I'm fine with the way I look,
Right.
So I can totally relate. You had said something about you tried crystal meth.
Right.
In the 80s?
Yeah, well, I tried it a few times in the 80s, and it really didn't do much for me.
Well, what's the difference in the crystal meth then and the crystal meth? Well, I guess you wouldn't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, now, well, this is the thing. And now it's so, I've seen the consequences of it now.
Right.
I have seen people that, have used it, and I don't want any part of that. That's very, no, I'm cool.
Meth ended up being my drug of choice.
Right.
I mean, like I was a garbage can, but once I got on meth, it's over.
Yeah.
And it's a force to be reckoned with.
Oh, by far, I can imagine. I mean, look, I got clean in 2003. And, back in the 90s when I was doing meth before I tried other things that really took me to the depths, I remember that just how crazy I thought I was, and looking at the people that I see, now, it's like night and day. It's like night and day.
So how long were you in active addiction for?
Almost 20 years, about 19 years. And if I count all the way back to when I was on Ritalin when I was 3, then, it's a lot longer than that. But, the thing is that, we're talking at that point almost 30 years. But, it's so much different now. It is so different now. Addiction is, it's a force, that our communities are going to have to deal with. The communities in this country have to deal with this now, because if we don't, 20 years from now, I don't know what our world's going to look like.
It's not going to look good.
No.
A lot of people are going to be zombified.
Right. I mean,
I don't know if you've heard of this new drug, but it's taken a city by force, and it's we got crocodile overseas, and it eats you from the inside out.
Yeah.
Well, there's a new drug up north and here, and it eats you from the outside in.
Oh, jeez.
And you're completely zombified. I'll show you the story afterwards, but
Okay.
they're using some kind of cat or dog tranquilizer or something.
Oh, I've heard of that. I can't remember what. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard.
So you've heard of it?
Yeah.
I mean, I've read the story, and it's definitely crazy.
That stuff's nuts. I'm cool again.
Yeah. They can keep that.
Well,
We're
this
good
is
here.
the thing, I mean, back in the day, I had a $300 a day heroin habit when I got arrested for the final time. And, in that 300 a day habit, I still didn't think I was going to die, Nowadays, $10 can kill you. $10 on the street, kill you graveyard dead. And, fear never kept me clean. Fear never scared me. But I will tell you this, it scares the hell out of me now.
Yeah.
The only thing that's kept me clean now is love. But I'll tell you, I am deathly afraid of what's out there today.
Yeah.
I
totally agree with that.
I've had to Narcan friends. I've had to, get friends into treatment. I've had to, do some things I never thought I'd have to do, when I got clean. And it is just absolutely amazing that, the way things have progressed. It's madness.
Do you have any pictures of you in active addiction?
Yeah, actually I do. This is a picture of me and my ex-wife. I'm sure you'll crop her out.
Yeah, we're gonna crop out the X's, just saying.
But yeah, this is after a really long, hard night. We had been up probably about, I don't know, a week at that point. Mm-hmm. And that picture, I can't even remember who took it, but I do remember that I felt like death in that picture.
Really?
Well, you'll see. You get a look at it, you'll understand. That was the depths right there.
So, do you care if we show Knoxville?
No, not at all. Please feel free. Get a good laugh out of it, because it should be worth something, right?
Well, we'll take a look at that, and we'll be right back. How old were you in that picture?
Gosh, I believe I was 30, maybe 31. But I think I was 30.
Wow. So were you on meth or cocaine?
I was on meth and heroin in that picture. By the time I had, by the time I was 31, I was on heroin for about 7 years at that point.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was, like I said, a complete and utter maniac. There was only one time when I actually tried to get clean, and I managed to put together about 7 months clean, but I was unable to maintain that because I wasn't doing anything. I was just abstinent again, and the abstinence, was driven by a girl again. I was trying to chase a girl, and so I chased her into a 12-step program because that's where she went. I decided that I would follow her in there, and I stuck around for about 7 months and managed to not use, but because I didn't do any of the work that we do in the program, there was no way I was going to stay.
Right.
It just, that's the thing. If nothing changes, then nothing changes. And I can put things off for a moderate amount of time.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is that, if I don't do something for my recovery on a daily basis, then I'm not going to be able to keep it. And I've proven it to myself.
As far as treatment goes, have you ever been to a rehab facility?
Well, does San Quentin State Prison count as rehab?
San Quentin?
Yes,
I think that blows a rehab out the water.
Yeah.
Let's please say more about that.
Okay. So by the time I was 31, which is when I walked into San Quentin, I had been arrested again more times than I can count.
Right.
For more things than I can even, put words to. I really cannot tell you how many times I've been arrested, and as a direct result of my disease.
Right.
But by the time I was 31, I had managed to keep a girl in what I call a hostage situation for about 5 years at that point. We were married, had a child together, and my addiction was still absolutely rampant. I was still had a huge habit, my $300 a day habit, and that caused a lot of wreckage between her and I. A lot of times, I'd have the police called on me. She'd call the cops on me. We'd get into fights. We'd get into fights over dope. I mean, we were both using. We were both absolutely insane. Yeah. And, finally she had enough. One night she threw me out of the house and she asked for a divorce. And she, moved her new boyfriend in. And I lost my freaking mind. More than I had already lost.
Right.
So that night, or one night, it was close to Christmas time, I completely went off the rails, and I decided that I was going to go do something about this. And so I loaded up my guns, put them in my car, and I started driving to her house. And in a strange twist of fate, God saw fit to have a police officer pull me over about a block and a half away.
Oh, wow.
And I was arrested. I was, cuffed up, thrown in the back of the car, and next thing you know, I was on my way to jail. Mm-hmm. Got out of jail for a couple of months before I guess it was really about a month. Got out of jail for a month before I went to court on this. And when I got to court, the judge said to me, "Mr. Russell, you have avoided prison for far too long, and that is something that we are going to rectify here today." Mm. And at that point, the prosecutor had seen fit to make a deal with me. He wanted me to plead guilty, and he would offer me 2 years, 4 months in state prison. I jumped on that like a grenade. And when the judge saw the deal, he said, no, we're not going to let that happen. That's not going to be no. I won't take anything less than 5 years and 8 months.
Mm.
And I looked over at the prosecutor. He just kind of shrugged his shoulders, and I just kind of shrugged my shoulders, and I took it because, I knew that in the end, this is my first time in prison. I wanted it to be as short as I possibly could. If I had fought what I was, I would have been so much worse.
Right.
But at that point, I knew I was done. I realized that if I kept living the lifestyle that I was living, eventually somebody was going to shoot me, or, I was going to get killed. I was going to die. A $300 a day habit turns into a $400 a day habit real quick, which can turn into a $500 a day habit. And I don't think I know anybody who survived a $500 a day habit at that point.
Well, heroin was a lot more pure back then.
Yeah.
When I was doing heroin, it was about $1,000 a day.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. And it's,
So did you flatten the whole 5 years and 8 months?
Actually, it's funny. I ended up going to fire camp, and in California, when you go to fire camp, they'll give you 3-for-1s. So every day you serve, you get 3 days taken off your sentence. Eventually, what I ended up serving was exactly 2 years, 4 months to the day.
Isn't that what the...
That is exactly what the prosecutor said. And I did 2 years, 4 months to the day.
In San Quentin?
Well, most of it was in San Quentin. I did about a year in San Quentin, spent about 6 months training for training to be a firefighter for the state of California. And then I spent about, 10 months fighting fires. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was an experience. It was definitely an experience. The crazy thing is, I was on the bus. They call it the Grey Goose, and they were transporting me from Placer County, California, down to the Bay Area again, which is, where all my madness went. I remember going across the bridges and seeing, all the places that I used to see all the time. And it was pretty crazy. I got to prison. I said to myself while I was on that bus, okay, God, I get it. Something's got to change. And I did that foxhole prayer. God, get me out of this. And if you can't get me out of this, protect me while I'm in it. Because, I had a kid at that point. My daughter was 3 years old. And I was, just absolutely terrified. And, I don't mind admitting that now. I would have never said that while I was on that bus, but I was absolutely terrified.
Yeah.
With good reason, because, I was going into one of the most, notorious places in California. San Quentin State Prison is where they house death row. They kill people there.
Yeah.
And I literally, just to give you an idea of what it was like, I was still standing in front of the guard's shack. Well, the guard's, the fishbowl is what they call it, where they watch everybody. I was still standing in front of the fishbowl with my sheets and my blankets and my clothes and everything. When I saw a man get stabbed 30 times and thrown off the 5th tier, and he landed about as far away he landed about 10, 15 feet away from me.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and that was when I realized, holy shit.
Yeah.
What the hell have you done?
Yeah.
And it's crazy because I knew, like I said, I was praying to God that foxhole prayer. And, a few hours later, when they finally got done stripping everybody out on the yard, checking us to make sure we didn't have any weapons or anything like that, when they stripped us all out in the pod, or West Block, they took me to my cell. And I was in the middle of kicking dope. I was standing there, and my cellie says, "Well, hey, man, you look like a pincushion, and you got, we're going to be on lockdown for the next 6 months because of what just happened. But if you want to get out of your cell for an extra hour a day, well, there's an NA meeting that comes in 3 times a week, and there's an AA meeting that comes in 3 times a week. So you can get out of the cell at least an extra 6 hours out of the week."
Yeah.
And I realized that was my sign. I truly don't believe anything happens by coincidence anymore. The program that I work, Narcotics Anonymous, has shown me that there are no coincidences, that a power greater than myself is at work in the world. And, I can take it upon myself to participate in what he's trying to do, or I can, shove it all off to the side. And usually when I shove things off to the side, they come back to bite me in the butt.
Yeah. So was that your breaking point that led you to recovery?
Absolutely. The breaking point was getting on the bus, feeling those waist chains, having my ankles chained together and chained to, 20 other dudes walking in a line onto a bus. That was the breaking point.
Yeah.
That was just the exclamation point at the end of the breaking point. That, like I said, fear would never keep me clean, but it sure as heck motivated me to get there.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it did. And some men came into that prison and shared with me some experience, strength, and hope. And, at that point, I had none of those things. I had no experience in the real world. All I lived was, I lived like a junkie. I was a fucking junkie.
Yeah.
I had no strength. I couldn't do it on my own. I can remember countless nights in the freaking trap house, crying and whining about how I wanted to get clean, but wouldn't do any of the work. As far as hope goes, the only hope I had was that I wouldn't wake up in the morning. I wanted to die. The lifestyle that I lived, the fact that I didn't die was a miracle.
Amen.
And, I'm blessed to be sitting here today, to be honest, because you know what? It wasn't in the cards. It really wasn't.
So you just celebrated 20 years. So what exactly is your clean date?
My clean date is February 2nd, 2003. That was the day I walked into San Quentin State Prison.
That's just absolutely amazing. I can't wait until, God willing, I make it and say, I'm 20 years clean.
Wow.
I was in active addiction for over 20 years, so I'd like to be in recovery for more than 20 years.
Right. Yeah, I
So.
completely understand that. I felt very special the day that I evened it out. When I picked up 19 years clean, I was lucky. I got to speak on that date at a meeting here in town that no longer exists, unfortunately. But I got to share my story, and I got to share a little experience, strength, and hope with others. And it made me feel like, all the stuff that I'd been through before was worth it. And this year, I got to do the same thing. I got to speak at another meeting in town and share my experience, strength, and hope. And it's a blessing. It's a responsibility, certainly.
Right.
But in that responsibility, I have found, that I have a life now that is worth something. That all those experiences, all those things that I put myself through led to the ability to be a father, the ability to be a decent son, the ability to be a friend to people. And in that I've found meaning in my life, and I can't, when I look at it, I say it again, none of this was in the cards for me, living the life that I was in active addiction. Active addiction was a living hell.
Yeah.
But at this point, I wouldn't trade that hell for anything in the world, because in treating my addiction through the 12 steps and through the recovery process, I have found so much more than I would have had if I'd never had the disease at all.
What led you to the state of Tennessee? What led you to Knoxville?
Well, that's a long story. My father and my mother both worked at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories. My dad was the head of the nuclear weapons program there for over 40 years. So he would come out here a lot, spend a lot of time at Y-12 and at Oak Ridge National Lab, and just trade information with them, I guess. I don't really know the details. He can't tell me, top secret stuff. But he always wanted to retire out here. Now, when I'd gotten out of prison, I'd started going to meetings, and I'd met my second wife, pardon me. I met my second wife there, and we were going to have kids. And my dad told me about his plans to retire out here. And, he'd spent a lot of time out here. My mother liked it out here, so they moved. Well, they were going to move out here, but my wife and I, when I had about 7 years clean, my wife and I both lost our jobs at the same place. We both worked for the same company. And when we lost our jobs, I thought, well, my parents are going to retire back, down south, back east. So maybe I should think about that, because if we're planning on having kids, they might want to see their grandkids someday,
Right.
So we decided we'd beat them to the punch. We decided we were going to move out here. So I applied for a job, and I got one. And then it was a matter of just packing up the cats, the dogs, and eventually my brother-in-law and my sister, and we've all moved out here together in a Ford Expedition and drove across country for 4 days with 4 cats and 2 dogs in an expedition. And it took us a minute to get here, but the second I got here, the job that I had been told that I had would no longer exist. So I had to scramble.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was very good that I was plugged into the fellowship. That said, I got a job, and I've been here ever since. It was mad scramble for a minute, but it was worth it.
What do you think drives a person to use, knowing what we know now with the fentanyl and the trank that me and you were talking about, and just everything? What do you think drives a person to use, knowing what we know now?
Well, I can say for me that I know that, like I said, it was a spiritual hole. I was looking for something outside of myself to fix what was inside me.
Right.
But the reality is that, there's one thing I've learned. A friend of mine says a lot. He says, if I'm the problem, then I'm also the solution. I can also be part of the solution.
Right.
And, I think that a lot of people are trying to fill an empty void inside themselves. Recovery is the answer to that empty void. At least that's what it's been for me. I can't speak for anybody else. I can speak for me. And what I've seen just through, 20 years of recovery and 20 years of working a program to the best of my ability is that when I treat this disease, the necessity to stick chemicals in my body to feel different is non-existent. There's no reason for me today to have to put in. That doesn't mean I won't. I do this on a day-by-day basis. And, for over 7,000 days, I have not found it necessary to stick a needle in my arm or to put a pipe to my mouth or anything else for that matter to change the way I feel. But that said, doesn't mean it can't happen tomorrow. Doesn't, you know, and it's not that I want to, you know, dash anybody's hopes here. I'm not trying to. I just have to remember that this disease doesn't go away just because I treat it.
Right.
You know, it's a chronic, and I believe it's a progressively, you know, it gets progressively worse over time.
Yeah.
In active addiction. When I treat it, though, it makes it easy. You know, it becomes a habit, and habits become my behavior, and my behavior is what needs to change if I want to stay clean.
Yeah. In a matter of opinion, what do you think we could do as a community to better help the addict that wants and seeks to help, but doesn't have the means to do so?
Learn to love them. Because in the end, I'll always tell you, fear never kept me clean. I was never afraid of the consequences. I never even gave thought to the consequences. The consequences were absolutely meaningless to me. But when I felt that love, when I felt that care, when I felt people's concern for me, well, it gave me the thought process. It put that, you know, it put me into that thought process that maybe I should do something different. You know, I mean, yeah, like I said, fear motivated me. Fear, you know, I mean, heck, walking to San Quentin scared the shit out of me.
Yeah.
But, you know, the love is what's kept me here. You know, the concern, the care, the fact that people actually, you know, want to help. When I have an issue, I've got a phone full of numbers right now, hundreds of people that I can call when I have an issue. When there's a problem, you know, I can find a solution.
Yeah.
But the only way that the community is ever going to change this, I think, is to make sure that people realize that there are people out there that care, that there are people out there that will love them until they can love themselves. You know, that's what it took for me.
Last question. If the sick and suffering addict were standing right in front of you, what would your message be to them?
That a chemical solution to a spiritual problem eventually fails. And that a practical solution is what's necessary. I found that practical solution through the 12 steps. I found that practical solution through connection to others. I found that practical solution through doing the work. The more I was willing to put myself out there and become a part of something bigger than me, the more I got out of it. And it's always been that way. I've had to do things that I did not believe in at first to make my life better. You know, I never thought that I would ever live a life like the one I live. But through working those 12 steps, through finding a power greater than myself, through forming connections with other people like me who understood the things I was going through, who'd been there before me, you know, through being of service to the community, I've been able to put together a pretty freaking amazing life. A life where I can be of service to others. A life where I can, you know, be a father to my daughters. You know, a life where even when things bad happen, or things that I consider to be bad, you know, they all serve a greater purpose. You know, and that greater purpose, you know, for me, has been recovery. It's been love. It's been amazing.
I totally agree with you. And that was a beautiful message. And I want to thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
You have an amazing journey, and if you're here and I'm here in the next 20 years, we will talk again.
All right. All right.
My name is Della. I'm here with John Russell, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me.